From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support for LPM podcasts comes from the Eye Care Institute and Butchertown Clinical Trials, where they strive for diversity, equity, and inclusion within their staff, patients, and clinical trial participants. To learn more, visit butchertown.clinic.
This is Where Y'all Really From. I'm Charlene Buckles, a proud Filipina Kentuckian, and today in the studio with me is Nancy Ngo. So, Nancy, I like to start every episode when I interview guests of asking, where are you from and where are you really from?
Right. So, hi, my name's Nancy Ngo. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, but my parents and I are from Vietnam, specifically in Ho Chi Minh City. And it's a really beautiful city in Ho Chi Minh, but my dad came over here in 1982 due to the Vietnam War, and he came as part of the Vietnamese boat people. And my mom came over here in 1997 after marriage to my mom.
Were they refugees or were they immigrants?
My mom was more of a straightforward immigrant that people think of, like there's marriage or there's work, and then she came over here. But my dad really came more after the events of the war, and Vietnamese people were basically given the option of sending one or two people in their family to get on a boat to go to whatever country they want. My dad and his older sister chose to come to the United States, but before that he had to stop for a couple years in Malaysia, a couple of years in different islands before he was able to make it to San Francisco, and then he made his roots in Kentucky.
And you had just graduated from U of L.
Yeah, I did. I graduated in May with my master's in public health.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And I wonder, too, we talked a little bit about, offline about navigating, parents who have come here as immigrants and you being born and raised here. What was that like for you here in Louisville and, trying to navigate all of that as a student and all of those things that we have to juggle?
Yeah. So one of the other aspects of my life is that I'm the eldest daughter of an immigrant family.
Oh, yeah.
So then you kind of get into that trope of the eldest daughter takes care of a lot of things in the family. I also act as a bridge between America and Vietnam for them, since I was born and raised with Vietnamese as my first language, and it took a while for me to learn English. But learning English was extremely vital because once I learned it well enough, I became the man translator for my entire family. Mm-hmm. Anytime they had doctor's appointments or having to deal with their grocery store and basically any sort of paperwork, I was the main person to sit down, walk them through what needs to be done, what needs to be provided to whatever organizations they're working through, and eventually just kind of take over a lot of the paperwork that they needed to do instead of just helping them.
What's really interesting is that when when Dana and I spoke about this and, talking about our parents and things, when I think about it in my head, for me, it happened, in the 90s, or you hear about when people talk about coming on and it's like 1.5 generation immigrant, and I haven't yet spoken to someone who was born and raised here and trying to navigate that and at such a young age. How was that like for you, like just generally growing up and navigating all of that?
I think when I was younger, I never really noticed there was a difference between myself and my peers. It was only when I started getting into college, when I started getting my own life by living in a dorm, hanging out with friends, being a little more independent of my parents, when I realized how much responsibility that I had from such a young age. For instance, my friends would hang out at parties all the time. I would just go straight home or just do whatever extracurricular activities that I was doing, like all the science clubs and all the math clubs and such. And even when I was living in the dorm, every single day I had a phone call with my parents talking about how to work through a Word document or how do I need to talk to a specific person about whatever topic. At some points, I would just have to take time out of my day to take them to doctor's appointments or just talking to health insurance for 4 hours. And we know how it gets with the wait time there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult for me even as an adult to manage, and then being in a whole different system that you've never grown up with and coming here when you're much older,
Yeah, and like one of the other things that I think that I started to think a lot about is people, whenever they're done with school, they would just hang out with their friends or they'd go on vacations with people over the summer. But then for me, it was a lot more of I'd come home every single week. I do all my work there. I travel back and forth between my parents and myself. I really also take care of my younger sister as well, since she's the baby, so she doesn't really have to take as much responsibility. So a lot of taking care of her, watching over the things she does also falls to me. And I don't know if that's just Asian American parents versus myself, or that's just a general thing with all Asian, like parents and kids.
I don't know. I feel like there is like this unsaid pressure to be the role model and to be a second parent. I think too, especially when you have first generation immigrant parents that are trying to navigate that. Like they're like, well, you got this. Like you can take care of them. It's like it's also like it's a part of. Well, at least for the Philippines, there is like there's words in which that are that describe the older siblings. So kuya is like older brother, and then ate is older sister, and it is something of like a reverence almost. Like you have to use that when you refer to your elders, even if it's like a sibling.
Right.
And so there is a way in which, like in our culture and then within our various languages that have, like you said, the elder child, but then also the elder daughter has this other level of responsibility. How did you deal with that pressure, just generally how did you manage all of it?
I think I managed it pretty well just because even though I'm talking a lot of my parents throwing a lot of responsibility, they do understand when I have boundaries such as exams or I need to do different activities, or even when recently I've been having to go out a lot for different organizations and different positions that I've been in. So I think that's something that's really unseen in a lot of Asian families, just because usually I keep hearing my other Asian parents saying that, oh yeah, my parents won't let me do this and that. But I'm really glad that my parents are understanding when it comes to things that are important. And I think that they're learning. So a lot of the pressure is there, but one of the things that have helped a lot is just they're pretty open to communication whenever it's really important.
And speaking of these extracurricular activities, recently in this past spring, you were the Derby Queen. You participated as the Derby Princess. Tell me about that experience. Why be a part of it, and how you got part of it?
Right. So I think one of the first things is just to explain what the Kentucky Derby Festival Royal Court is. So essentially, we go through a application process where over 80 individuals this year applied, and they had transcripts sent in. They had essays written on why they want to be part of the royal court. We had to write down all of our extracurriculars, GPAs, and so forth. After that, everyone who qualifies goes through preliminary interviews where we have 5 minutes to answer as many questions as possible with 9 judges, which, that's a lot of time, especially when you're someone who overthinks on questions and tries to say as much as they can as short of time possible. After that, you are narrowed down to 25 individuals who have to go through a 10-minute interview with 3 out-of-state judges. And the point of that is try to make sure that there's really no sort of bias that's there whenever we're narrowing down people. So with that, I had to do 2 letters of recommendation from someone and then a lot of different paperwork afterwards. After that interview, we ended up with 5 Derby princesses. And these individuals, they chose based on academic achievements and also a lot of the community-driven passions that we have for in our respective fields. Then with that, we wait till maybe April or so, and with a spin of the wheel, we choose a Derby queen to reign for the next year. Luckily, I was standing at position 1, which honestly is my lucky number, and they spun at 1, so I guess I got that position.
For those that don't know about the Kentucky Derby Festival Royal Court, can you tell us all what that entailed, and how long the commitments and how many things you had to do for that once you got selected?
Yes, so once you got selected, typically people start maybe the second week of January, and it ends right after the Kentucky Derby. So from there, we had to go to, they claimed 70 plus events, but we went to 82 events this year. There's maybe one event per week towards the beginning. And then when you get to April where everything's picking up, we go to 5 or 6 events a day. There are a lot of times where we woke up at 3 a.m. We would sleep in the van whenever we had a break, and we just trudged on through until we were done.
Wow. Like, what kind of events were there? Like, what
Yeah.
I cannot even list like 82 events in my head. What type of community events or particular things were you all doing during that time?
So there were some events that are sponsored by the Kentucky Derby Festival. For instance, there is Justice Fest, which is where JCPS students have different ideas to promote different issues and try to resolve social justice events. So that was a really cool experience. And then there are some fun events. So trying out food, having bourbon tastings and all of the works. And there's another aspect where we really try to prioritize community service. So each of the Derby princesses were able to choose an organization where we would go and host a volunteer service event there, just to make sure that we are not only just going to have fun, we're also giving back to the community that has chosen us and we are happy to represent.
What was the event where you had to be on call at 3 o'clock in the morning?
That was Derby week.
Oh.
We had TV showings starting 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. So we had to get ready at 3, prepare at 4, and then get on at 5 all the way through 7. We went to backside where we were able to meet some horses by some of the trainers. And then it all went through the night where we went to a lot of galas. We went to the Knights of Columbus charity events as well. One of the biggest events that we were able to go to was on Friday night of the night right before Derby. We were dressed in expensive evening gowns, and it cost, I think, like $12,000 for us to come in.
Wow.
So, it was a really fun experience. But aside from that, some of the other events were wardrobe fittings, meeting with the mayor, meeting with the governor, and all of the fun things that we don't really post about, but they're all cool. And it's the same way as, trying out all the foods in Louisville.
Did you have to provide those garments, or I've heard that they get you all dressed up and
they get us all dressed up, and we are able to keep all of the stuff.
Whoa!
So I just have a large ball gown just in my closet, and I don't know what to do with it.
That's almost incentive right there to apply. What was your favorite event? I mean, you talked a little bit about the social justice fair, but is there a couple of them that you were like, that was a really cool experience you would not have experienced outside of the Derby Princess?
Honestly, I loved all the events because they're all very unique in their own ways. But Thunder over Louisville was amazing. We were on the 24th floor of the Galt House, so we had a very nice view there. And I was also able to invite 2 people to come experience the Thunder with me. And then we also had radio shows, and we were able to go to the control center where we saw how everything went down, how there's a countdown and everything. Literally, as soon as the fireworks went off, their countdown immediately went to 365 days until Thunder over Louisville. Really cool. So that was a really cool experience to go through.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so why did you feel compelled to apply? What made you want to be a part of that?
Yeah. So initially, it was one of those things where I'm like, wow, I have never seen an Asian American, any sort of pageantry position, but I just want to make it a point that this position is not pageantry. It's more really academic achievement, community service. So just take a note that even with those positions, though, I have never seen an Asian American. And those that I have seen was from, I think the last person was 2012. And it was Taylor Sang, who was a Derby princess then. And I was like, okay, I would just apply for fun. If I get it, I get it. If I don't, then I don't. And I also knew a lot of previous Derby princesses who've told me that it's a lot of work, but it's a very worthwhile experience. So imagine my surprise when I get the call back saying that I've gone through the first round and then the second round and then that I made it, and then especially being queen. And I think it's just a very special experience for me because initially this Derby is something that I really love, but I've never been able to experience just because of busyness, family obligations, and also, my God, the price to get into Churchill Downs for the Derby. So that was one thing. But then the other thing was really special when I won Derby Queen and I saw my family sitting at a table, like screaming their heads off, and they were
Oh,
jumping and hugging each other. And even till now, anyone who was at that event would go up to me and say, "Oh yeah, I remember your family," and like how excited they were to see you win. So it was just such a special moment, not only to represent the Asian American community, but also just to show my parents that there's all these experiences out there and what we as Asian American youth could do to help raise awareness about Asian Americans.
this is Where Y'all Really From, a podcast from LPM, Louisville Public Media.
Your mornings are busy, and finding the time to stay up to date on what's happening in Louisville and Southern Indiana isn't easy. I'm Bill Burton. Join me to stay informed on your terms each weekday with the LPM Daily News Briefing, the news you need to start your day, from Louisville Public Media. See you in the morning.
Welcome back to Where Y'all Really From. And, talking about a little bit before about how you were saying, you were juggling a lot of these, like trying to explain,
Yeah.
all of the things that, different processes here in the States, but then also just generally Little League insurance.
Mhm.
How was that like explaining to your parents like what the Derby is and what do you all have like back-to-back schedules for the entire Derby festival, right? And having to be at
Right.
all these different places and all of these promos and community service things. And so how is that like juggling that with your parents and also explaining to them like,
Yeah.
hey, this is like a really
Yeah.
intense process, but very,
Right.
very cool experience.
So maybe from the moment I told them I applied, which honestly I only told them I applied after I got into the first round because I
Mm-hmm.
knew they were going to be like, "Oh my God, what is that?" But even up to now, like anytime we mention it, they're like, "Oh, you're such a pageant princess," and it's like a whole joke in our house. But as they saw me wake up at 2 a.m. to get ready for 3 a.m. call times and coming back at midnight for maybe every single day since April, they started to realize how much of a big deal it is, like how many eyes are looking at me every time. Every single word or action that I did was recorded at some capacity. Like even during Derby, even like that wasn't as important for us just because no one was really paying attention to us. There's thousands and thousands of people there and a lot of elected officials there as well. So we were the last people they cared about. However, like I noticed a lot of different cameras were pointed at us because they're like, "Oh, who's that? Why do they have a sash?" So they started to better understand what a big position this is, especially for college students and for women and for Kentuckians as well. And they still don't get it 100%, but they understood the importance and how much work that I had to put into. So that was when my sister started taking over some of those aforementioned responsibilities, and she's done a good job so far.
And you had posted too, I think, on your social media. I want to say maybe in your Instagram or something that it was such an honor to be named queen
Yeah,
for you because it really represented the AAPI community
right.
and what that means. So, what does that mean for you to be, the Derby queen for this
Yeah.
past year, and then, but then also that representation part?
Yeah. So you know how API has never been fully represented, even though we're such a crucial part to the United States of America and our history in general. And so a lot of the things that I've been doing really kind of started after the Atlanta massacres. And I really started thinking about I really need to do something in order to not only represent ourselves, but also just to better understand the things that different generations have gone through and what we as youth can do in order to, kind of have a better future for our grandkids and our future generations. So, by being part of this organization, I've really been able to have different opportunities to speak about API. And I've also been working with different organizations around Louisville and also virtually to talk about what things that I can do as a Derby princess to talk about. Okay, here's all the cultural experiences that we've gone through. Here are our feelings revolved around the Atlanta massacres, about COVID in general, and all these other things that people misunderstand about Asian Americans. So it was a very unique experience as a Derby queen to be in.
You touched on this a little bit as an API youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder if there's a difference in, I don't want to say your generation because that makes me old, but like in like the younger generation, in college age, and you're still managing these responsibilities and the family, obligations that you have for your immigrant parents and for first generation parents in general. But is there a way that you feel like the API youth now today in your college campus and all of these things, is it different? Like, is it a way where you all are taking your history and your present and your future, making it your own? Because for me, as a 30-something-year-old mom of two, managing both my mom, my children, I'm still in that realm of like, I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't know how to engage. I don't know like what we should do. But do you feel like that sentiment is similar, different?
I definitely agree with you. As a 23-year-old with no kids, like most of my time is with my parents and my schooling and a lot of social responsibilities and relationships I'm still trying to figure out right now. But I do think that there is a large gap right now just because, a lot of the AAPI youth are growing up in the United States and are spending the majority of their lives in the United States. So they're learning a lot of American culture, American values, and that could especially clash with Asian parents and grandparents, so forth, and especially in the Vietnamese community. My dad was honestly one of the first Vietnamese people in Louisville. So he and whoever is around his age and older created this entire community in Louisville. And so they have embedded a lot of their values that they brought from Vietnam here. So it's really difficult to navigate that sometimes. Like, for instance, I was just talking to my parents about moving into a new place, and they're like, okay, like, give us your keys. Like, we want to be able to come in and out whenever. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, but there's boundaries. And even though I understand that their fear, because I am moving out by myself for the first time in a long time, they're not going to be able to, see me whenever they want. So I understand the fear. But now there's this gap where API youth want to be independent as soon as possible and try to pave their own paths as young as possible, versus my grandparents really set the path for my parents, and they're just trying to do the same thing for me. So in a way, I understand the things that they're going through, but it's just hard now, especially with learning American values and also with technology. They don't know how to use technology, and the youth is now responsible for teaching them how to basically live with all of the iPads and the smartphones and so forth in this era.
I find it so really fascinating because when I think about my youth and like high school and college, I was like, I don't want to say angry, maybe resentful was the word. I was really resentful about my upbringing and how I like missed out on a lot of things. And I felt like my parents just didn't understand. My mom didn't understand why I needed to like play sports. Like she was concerned about my grades and like that didn't, the extracurriculars. What does that really mean? And so I was really, really resentful. But it seems like, and I don't know, maybe this is just like more anecdotal, but it seems like the more younger API people, API Kentuckians particularly that I talk to that are college age, that seems more of a balance, like it's more respectful. Yeah. Do you find that same sentiment, or are you also find like there's like this like rebellious streak in all of us? We're just during that early age.
I mean, I know for a fact there's the rebellious stage in every single AAPI youth. Don't get me wrong. Like in my head, I also have thought multiple times about, oh, maybe I should just do whatever I want. I don't need to tell them what to do. But it goes back to that eldest daughter sentiment where you're like, okay, I can't screw anything up. Like there's a lot of pressure on me. There's a lot of responsibility. I shouldn't do any of that stuff. Let my younger siblings just do whatever they want. I'll just like deal with whatever I have to do. It's kind of more of setting this, I don't know, like it's a whole thing where I shouldn't be doing all these bad things, because then it'll reflect poorly on my parents and then poorly on our entire family. It's like that whole process where Asian Americans really care about their reputation more about the inner happiness within their family. So I never went through it, but I'm sure a lot of people have held some level of resentment. And I do feel angry sometimes that I'm not able to do certain things that all my friends are able to do. But I think that's just a part of the culture that we have right now. And I hope in the future we can change some level of that.
What does your future hold for you now? You know, you've accomplished getting your master's, Derby Princess, and Derby Queen. What is the path forward for you now?
So I will be starting law school at the University of Louisville, Brandeis School of Law. That's a long phrase. But I'm really excited because I'm going to be there as part of the human rights advocacy program. So I'll be able to use my abilities or whatever skills that I will be growing soon in order to advocate for human rights, and specifically amongst the immigrant population and low income. So hopefully with all of the things that I've done with Derby Queen, with getting my master's and everything, I'll be able to use those skills and my anecdotes to benefit the community in a different way.
Well, it's really exciting, and we're looking forward to seeing what you accomplish next.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to finish up and wrap it up with the lightning round questions.
All right.
And so if you've listened to season 1, you kind of know what those are, but we'll try to go really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
What is your superpower?
Being patient.
That's really, really funny, actually. Yeah, that's really funny. What song do you jam out to?
Currently, it's Ordinary Man by Ozzy Osbourne and Elton John.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
but there's a lot of K-pop in there. So, can't remember most of the names right now.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
What's your comfort food?
Barbecue chips.
Wow, yeah, you are really good at this lightning round. And that is really delicious.
Yes.
What is the most Kentucky thing that you do?
I don't know if this is a Louisvillian thing, but just correcting people when they say Louisville incorrectly. It's such a thing. I don't understand. If people in Louisville say Louisville, then just follow it and say Louisville. Not Louisville, not Louisville. It's Louisville.
What's funny about that is I recently interviewed someone. They're like, I had to really practice how you say Louisville, and I could not, But anyway, that's really, really funny.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and
Absolutely.
In your journey. So we look forward to seeing what happens next in the path that you pave.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Where Y'all Really From is created and produced by Dan Wu, Charlene Buckles, May Suramek, and me, Nima Kulkarni. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. Our associate producer is Alex Biscardi. Kojin Tashiro wrote our theme song, and Leanne Gann created our logo. Where Y'all Really From is part of the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator, with support from the Eye Care Institute's Butchertown Clinical Trials. Our Lexington interviews are recorded at Radio Lex with engineering and assistance by Mark Royce. For more information and to keep in touch, visit whereyallreallyfrom.org.